said to a few people that were here earlier, you're working with what did you say, Linda, the second string? Yes. The junior varsity team, the B team.
Who often come off the bench and win the game.
I saw that.
All right, I think we're all here. Our Zoomers are popping back on. Okay. Welcome back and a warm Easter morning welcome to Father Dainin Lewon, a student of Joshin Roshi. He took Jukai back in 2016. Father Lewon is an interfaith hospital chaplain at the University of Chicago Hospitals. And it is so wonderful that Father Lewon is here this morning to share with us his talk entitled Easter, the Story of Awakening. Thank you, Father.
Thank you. Can you hear me well? Okay, very good. May this time of Dharma talk be the time of awakening into oneself and into one's own journey. Amen. Each time when I give a talk, I wonder, how is this talk going to change me? Because it's not that I'm giving this talk only to the people that are going to listen to me, but I'm giving this talk to myself as well. And the first person that has to like this talk is me. Because if I don't like this talk, then no matter what I do with this talk, it will not be something that I can own it myself. One of my professors at the Divinity School who taught me homiletics, meaning teaching of preaching, said, it's not so important what you say, it's more important what people hear. And believe me, very often after I gave a talk or I preached, people were coming to me, this was a pretty good sermon you said about this and that. And I'm just later wondering where the heck they found that thought in my sermon. But that's, I guess, the art of speaking, that on one hand, we say one thing, and on the other hand, sometimes people can hear something different because we all process things differently. Awakening. When I think about Easter, yes, I think about the story that we can read in the Bible, the story of a Jewish man who lived more than 2,000 years ago. The story of a man who had an experience of awakening when he was in the desert. And he was introduced into that way by another gentleman by the name of John the Baptist. And then during his experience in the desert, he moved from being a carpenter into being a preacher, from being a carpenter to being Christ, anointed one. For some people, Messiah. It is the story of one who had strong relationships with a group of people with whom he walked and celebrated life and different events. The first miracle that we can read in the scriptures, Christian scriptures, is the wedding miracle of changing water into wine. But today I'm going to focus on the last moments of the life of Jesus of Nazareth. As some of us perhaps are aware, there was a feast day of Passover in Jerusalem, and a lot of people were coming to Jerusalem to celebrate the moment of moving from slavery into freedom, from Egypt into the promised land. And there was the group of people having dinner in the upper room. And they were eating, they were drinking, they were blessing each other, they were singing. And then they moved to the garden. And some of them were falling asleep in that garden. And one of them, Jesus of Nazareth, was awake. The story says that he was moving back and forth between accepting what was going to happen to him and fighting with the knowledge that it might be tough. And it happened more than once. Father, meaning he was addressing God, take away this chalice from me, meaning it's going to happen, but let your will be done, not mine. And that happened 3 times. He was not at peace. He was very much connected with his mind and body and trying to be connected with a bigger picture and trying to find meaning in what is awaiting for him. Personally, I'm not even sure if he exactly knew every aspect of what he is going to go through. And then there was a betrayal by one of his closest disciples. And then the night and the next morning were difficult. He was imprisoned, being moved from the high priest to the secular leaders of Jewish community, then moving back to the high priest, then to Pilate, kind of pushed around. And then the crucifixion. And on the way to the crucifixion, there's a story of a few people that he meets. Carrying the cross was too heavy for him. So one of the bystanders had to help him with that cross. There were women who wiped his face because it was full of sweat and blood. And then he was crucified, but not alone. He was crucified with 2 other people. It was a community. And then death happens, which was the ultimate of that day. Put to grave, and people went into different directions. Some of them were confused. Some of them perhaps were ready to move on, but it was just too much. Let's just leave this on Golgotha and go with our own lives. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday happens. And then women came to the grave, and it was empty. Emptiness. And then for the next 40 days, the Bible tells us that he appeared at least 7 times. 7 times. And the first few times he was not recognized. He was different. Life, suffering, death, nothing, resurrection, and not being recognized. What and where is the story of awakening here? And for whom it is the story of awakening? Sometimes when we are experiencing change in our own lives, we are experiencing that change because we feel that something is not maybe working for us. We are experiencing change because of external influences have impact on our life. We are experiencing change because we find ourselves in the moment of one's own life where it just changed. And in that change, sometimes we cannot recognize ourselves. Sometimes people cannot recognize us. Sometimes they expect that. And sometimes we can expect that maybe nothing happened. But in reality, everything happened. And sometimes we ask ourselves, why are we so different? And sometimes other people can ask themselves, why are they different? Why is he or she different? And often, not always, but often, it is only after we experience something and after we slow down, we can point into the moment where we can have this aha realization. We are not the same. When I hear the story of resurrection, yes, I can think about something that happened 2,000 years ago. Or I can think about something that happens to me and to other people all the time. And that story from 2,000 years ago is just pointing into something that each one of us can experience. And that's the link that I see between the story of Passover and the story of the resurrection. Because the story of Passover is not the story of the liberation that took place. It's not just the story of the liberation that took place thousands of years ago. But each time when the community gathers for Seder, the community celebrates our own liberation. The community finds oneself being liberated over and over and over again. And that whole aspect, that whole process of liberation, moving from slavery into the freedom, is not something that happens, that is in the past, but something that is in the present continues. It's not we were liberated, but it is the story of how we have been liberated, or how we have been liberating. I am liberated. The same thing is with the story of resurrection. The resurrection did not just happen 2,000 years ago. It's the story of being resurrected continually. And here, as an interfaith chaplain, for me, when I sit with the Christian leaders and the Jewish leaders and the Buddhist leaders, or practitioners, I should say, that's, we are leaders, but also what's more important, we are practitioners. We share our own experiences. We go beyond our own denominations, beyond our own religious affiliations. And we ask ourselves, how are those stories shared by these different traditions shape who we are? How can we find ourselves in those stories? What is for us to learn in those stories that are shaping how people think, how they relate to themselves, how they relate to others, how they relate to the higher reality? So what is resurrection? If you ask me, I give you the story from the Bible. But that story can, if you just stick with that story in a literal way, it will only create divisions and separation. It will point to how different we are. But is that the point of this story? Is that what even Jesus intended? Or is this what we did with that story? And with any other story. We used stories to divide ourselves. But that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is to inspire us. The point of the story is to make us learn something. Not so much about what happened in the story, but how the story is changing me. So how is the story of resurrection changing me in my life? There are a lot of fears that I have. And some of them are coming from my childhood, growing up under communism in Eastern Europe, where people were afraid of talking too much because we didn't know who was listening. The story of a 4.5-year-old child whose father left for the United States, and he didn't understand why his father left. And why one evening he was with me, and then I saw him in the car and waving. Didn't know he was leaving. I didn't know I wouldn't see him for 6-7 years. I didn't know how that will change me. And finally being able to come to the United States, and my parents not being able to see eye to eye because they grew to be different people. then going back to Poland. So, and just occasionally for summer vacations. In 2001, coming back to the United States to study in college, and trying to find my own way, and trying to learn in a new way to relate to my father, and trying to understand my own desire for God, desire to be part of something other than what I was experiencing, the pain. I'm sorry if I become too personal, but if I talk about resurrection, I have to mention one of the evenings I was in 6th grade, where I'm watching TV here in the United States, Polish TV, and my parents are arguing in another room. And this little Mikey is promising himself that he would not put himself in the position where he would have to experience what his parents are experiencing. And at that moment, I felt like connecting oneself with God and being married to God would be the answer. And I kept that promise pretty well. And then becoming a priest. And then after becoming a priest, 12 and a half years of working for the Archdiocese of Chicago. In the midst of that, I became a member of the Zen Center. I struggled with that God. Maybe even struggled with that God more than my parents struggled with each other. I struggled with my experience of marriage to the institution. I had my moments of suffering, but also joy and celebration. And if I only focus on one or the other, that's not the full story. The story is complex. And because the story is complex, it is a beautiful story. Not just because it's mine, but it's beautiful because it led into something that I wouldn't expect I would be able to experience. The story of finding my ministry, finding my priesthood, finding my life in a new way in 2020. When I realized that God is bigger than what I believed. That God is, that's community, church, Sangha is bigger than what I thought. That's the way how I can minister to people. I can take it out of the box and make it an experience not just that will help me to be more awake, but also can help maybe other people. And becoming a chaplain, becoming a hospital chaplain, moving into the area where there's so much suffering, but with suffering comes healing. Yeah, for sometimes that suffering is longer, sometimes it's shorter, sometimes it leads into death, but most of the time, at least in the place where I live, where I work, in the hospital, People leave hospital in better shape than they come. So I started to look at the story of suffering as something that changes us. Makes us new. We are not the same anymore. And to be, for me, mindful about that became very crucial experience. And not blaming. I realized that at the moment when I stop blaming myself, stop blaming other people, stop blaming an institution, at the moment when I stop blaming, but I sit with my experience, I find enlightenment. I find myself being anointed. I find myself being more alive. I find myself in a new way. And I experience myself in a new way. And when I decided to move from working for the Archdiocese of Chicago to working for the hospital, I was able to find Christian Catholic communities that were able to embrace myself in a way that I struggled to embrace myself before. And the importance of being awakened to one's own destiny and to see how marvelous the journey can be is the moment of the resurrection for me. But at the moment when I was experiencing resurrection, my own family, those who were the closest, were not able to recognize me. How can you leave God? Mom, I'm not leaving God. No, you are leaving God. No, not leaving God. I'm still a chaplain. No, you are leaving. My dad struggling with, well, you are no longer a priest. No, I am a priest. There's no way how I can leave that. Even if you take literally Catholic theology, once a priest, always a priest. And you are dedicating yourself to God, and now you are dating. Like, there were some people who, I remember when I was making a transition, I was told by my family, you will never make it. And I found on my journey people who believed in me. Strangers. Were able to help me on my journey to Emmaus. There's the story that after the resurrection, disciples were walking and they were just asking themselves, what are we going to do now? And somebody joined them and they were walking and talking and everything. Only in the evening, when they were getting ready to rest, that extra visitor took bread and fish and said the blessing, and in that moment they recognized, wow, that's Jesus. The story of resurrection. Last Tuesday, I was coming from the church, and I realized that I had a nail in my tire. So I took my phone. I wanted to say I dialed, but we don't dial things on the cell phone. But I called my pa. I called my dad. And I said, I need your help. And I came to my parents, and my dad fixed my tire. And there are still parts of my life that we don't discuss, for better or worse. But where we are right now, where I am right now in 2024, where my family is right now in 2024, where I am as a chaplain, as a minister, as partner, as priest, I wouldn't be if not for an experience of death, if not for the experience of change and suffering, physical, emotional, spiritual, intellectual. But only by embracing that suffering, like that experience, like Jesus did in Gethsemane. And believe me, I was fighting with it, like he did. And by experiencing some disappointments with people, by meeting people that I wouldn't expect that they would help me, and by having this time of nothingness, like being in the grave, I was able to find myself alive again in a way that I didn't expect. What is the story of resurrection? I can stick with the story that happened 2,000 years ago, but that's not my story. But I can look into my own Easter, I can look into my own story of the resurrection. And I can say, I believe in that story. Only when I look into my own story, only when I embrace my own story, at the end, I can say that what happened more than 2,000 years ago and what I am experiencing right now, even though it's not the same, is the same story. If I don't experience resurrection, I cannot believe in the resurrection. If I don't experience death, it's hard to experience life. If I don't experience evil, it's hard to experience goodness. If I don't experience sadness, it's hard to experience joy. Thich Nhat Hanh, one of the best Christians, in his book, Living Buddha, Living Christ, he wrote, Christology is the study of the life of Christ. When speaking about Christ, we also have to know whether we mean the historical Jesus or the living Jesus. The historical Jesus was born in Bethlehem, son of a carpenter, traveled far from his homeland, became a teacher, and was crucified at the age of 33. The living Jesus is the Son of God, who was resurrected and who continues to live. In Christianity, you have to believe in the resurrection or you are not considered a Christian. I am afraid this criterion may discourage some people from looking into the life of Jesus. This is a pity, because we can appreciate Jesus Christ as both an historical door and the ultimate door. When we look into and touch deeply the life and teaching of Jesus, we can penetrate the reality of God, love, understanding, courage, and acceptance are expressions of the life of Jesus. God made himself known to us through Jesus Christ with the Holy Spirit and the kingdom of God within him. Jesus touched the people of his time. He talked with prostitutes and tax collectors, and he had the courage to do whatever was needed to heal his society. As the child of Mary and Joseph, Jesus is the son of woman and man. As someone animated by the energy of the Holy Spirit, he is the Son of God. The fact that Jesus is both the Son of Man and the Son of God is not difficult for a Buddhist to accept. We can see the nature of non-duality in God the Son and God the Father. Because without God the Father, within him the Son could never be. But in Christianity, Jesus is usually seen as the only Son of God. I think it is important to look deeply into every act and every teaching of Jesus during his lifetime and to use this as a model for our own practice. Jesus lived exactly as he taught. So studying the life of Jesus is crucial to understanding his teaching. For me, the life of Jesus is his most basic teaching, more important than even faith in the resurrection or faith in eternity. When I was working on this Dharma talk, I was asking myself, who am I? Am I, and I will use terms, religious terms, am I more Christian who is into Buddhism? Or am I already Buddhist who is not able to let go Christianity because it's part of who I am? Or am I something totally different than that? I know one thing. I might not be able to answer the question, am I this or that? But I know that the teaching of Buddha, the teaching of Jesus, and the teaching of my own life experiences are crucial for me. At the end, I just want to, maybe some of you are aware of him, Dr. Rudolf Steiner. He was anthroposophist and founder of something that is called spiritual sciences. And in his core, very Christian, but at the same time so far from Christian orthodoxy as you could imagine. Very much rooted in the experience of what Thich Nhat Hanh spoke about. He wasn't so much interested in staying and believing in the Christ that was 2,000 years ago. He was more interested in experiencing how, looking into that Christ 2,000 years ago, how can I experience my own Christhood? How can I experience being Christ? How is that cosmic reality of that? We all are Christs, like we all teach in Buddhism, that we all are Buddhas. We are everything, the whole creation, the physical, the spiritual, the intellectual, it's all Christ, it's all anointed. It goes through life, death, and resurrection, like our 4 seasons, at least here in Chicago.
Could you please, I'm sorry, could you please scoot your microphone a little closer for us on Zoom here? Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Thanks, Callie. He said something that kind of struck me as something very Christian and very Buddhist at the same time. He said, and so the Easter festival opens up for us a long vista of the whole future of the earth and the future evolution of humanity. And as far as a guarantee that those who are Christ-inspired will be transformed from Saul, S-A-U-L, people into Paul, people, and will hold with increasing clarity a spiritual fire, just as the Christ was revealed in advance to Moses and his followers in the material fire of the thorn bush and the lightning on Sinai, so truly he will be revealed to us in spiritualized fire of the future. He is with us always until the end of the world, and he will appear in the spiritual fire to those who have allowed their eyes to be enlightened through the event of Golgotha. Human beings will behold him in the spiritual fire. They behold him to begin with in a different form. It is in a spiritual fire that they will behold him for the first time in his true form. Christ is bigger than Jesus. Resurrection is bigger than the story of 2,000 years ago. Easter is bigger than looking for the eggs. It's the story of how we find ourselves being alive again and again and again. It's the story of becoming awake. For me, it's the story of being able to smile and look into my future, but only look into my future with knowing that who I am today is precious to me. Now it's 10:45.
I think we have a few moments then for some conversation, some comments, response, reactions. Anyone in the Buddha Hall have the microphone to pass around? That'd be lovely.
Is this working?
Fantastically.
I got the microphone. I'll go first. First of all, Michal, thank you so much. It was beautiful. It allowed me to think about my death and resurrection from being where I was to where I'm now going. And it goes beyond, beyond the religion I was born with, beyond the beliefs that I've held. And it was an amazing way to tell your story as part of today's story. To that end, I did want to tell everybody that Ann Hogetsu Smith and Michal and I have been discussing putting together an interfaith circle where we're going to be exploring the faiths of our birth or our heritage, our Buddhist and Zen similarities, commonalities, and how it's affected all of us. The first meeting is going to be April 11th at 11 a.m. We're going to try to do it live, but there'll be more information coming. But for those of you I know, Martina, Bryce have expressed an interest. We'll be getting information out, and I don't think any of us have any idea where it's going to go, but I think we're going to have a lot of fun doing it. So I just wanted to let everybody know.
Michael, Dharma brother, thank you so much. I grew up Jewish with a family that didn't want me to say the word Jesus or Christ. I became frightened of saying that word When I was in, I don't know, second or third grade, we made these, at Christmas time, we made these little ornaments that were to go on a woman's coat. This was in the 1950s. They wore brooches on coats. And my mother refused to wear it. Said, oh, we don't wear those things. Those are just for Christians. And in that moment, I woke up. As a little boy, I woke up and saw the stupidity of that. Now, it took me years to really get past that in my religion. But personally, in my heart, I said, this is ridiculous. My best friend was Catholic next door. How could that be? You know, it just was stupid. So I woke up. In my adulthood, I've woken up in many, many ways. And I'm calling those moments of awakening enlightenment. But enlightenment, awakening, it doesn't mean anything if you don't change your life, which is what I heard you talking about so beautifully. And I want to thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for your talk. Yeah, I was really inspired by the way in which your talk made me think about its correlation to this psychologist, Assagioli. And he talks about how every human being has a unifying center, an authentic unifying center, which is our higher self. And it's the being that allows us to integrate ourselves and our experiences so that we can become a true expression of self. And what I hear in your talk about the resurrection as a historical event and as a unfolding reality, a timeless reality, is like a unifying center for the faiths of the world. And that, you know, and what you just said, this self-resurrection is actually a unifying center for the different faiths. How does the idea and the truth of resurrection actually resurrect the separateness into unity, the separateness of the different world religions, the different human personalities, that resurrecting impulse actually transforms the boundaries into unity.
Yo, online.
Thank you. I'll start it off online. Thank you for your talk. It's so lovely. I really like how you said towards the beginning, it's not so much what you say, but it's more important what people hear. And I feel like in your talk, I really hear that beginner's mind of what I feel like you bring to your spiritual journey. Like, I really appreciate you sharing that seeking way and how that's evolved in your life. So I so appreciate this morning you sharing that with us.
If nobody else is going to say something, may I say one?
Robin. Oh, sorry.
Robin.
Robin just raised her hand.
Great.
Sorry.
I just wanted to say that I loved all the ways you had us look at resurrection. Thank you very much.
Before the talk started, I mentioned that I would have to leave at 10:45, and I didn't want him to think I was being rude, but you can see that it was important enough for me to stay longer beyond. It was very moving. Thank you. There's so much that could be commented on, but I just want to highlight the one thing that really impacted me is I go through life trying to be one and done. You know, that I learned something and now I learned it. Or I experienced something and and I don't want to be that way. I can just notice in the way I approach life sometimes that's like, if I haven't figured, as soon as I figure out this problem, I'll be good, right? And what you really reminded me of is that it's not a resurrection, it's not a liberation, it's got an ing at the end of it. You know, it's a process, and we have a journey, and we just keep doing it over and over, and that's what life is. And that in and of itself is liberating, awakening, enlightening. So thank you.
I was also thinking about the elephant on the Zendo floor, which is Buddha. And, you know, so it's remarkable to me thinking about Jesus's life, this archetypal life, which is mirrored in so many ways, by Shakyamuni Buddha's life. You know, born, didn't like the situation, left, almost starved to death. Somebody fed him, a woman fed him. He met his further ascetics. They became his first Sangha. He did a teaching. You know, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but it was remarkable to me to reflect again on how all of these religions really have this archetypal story, and they're all getting at the same point, aren't they? We're all one.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to give this Dharma talk and to reflect upon my own life and share that with you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful Sunday, everyone.
Happy Easter.